Hi everyone! Today we're interviewing Jennifer Jones and Grant Falvo, who are two researchers at the LTER at KBS. Welcome!
Thanks!
Thank you.
So I'm going to be asking them about their research and a little bit about their jobs. What do you both work on now? What's your current project?
Yeah, so we both study microbes.
Mm-hmm.
I study microbial ecology, particularly now in soils, looking at how microbes can be used in the soil can be used to improve plant growth and plant drought tolerance.
So what are microbes?
They're tiny organisms that we cannot see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kinds of, are there a lot of different kinds, or is it like one species?
Actually, a fun fact about that, in a handful of soil here, we have more microbial species than there are mammals on the planet.
Wow.
So like thousands.
So many.
Wow.
Just in a handful.
Yeah.
Have you guys, are you still discovering different kinds, or is it really hard to know what's out there? How do you find them?
Other people are still discovering them. That's not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do a lot to identify them, usually by taking a soil sample and extracting DNA, and looking at, from this DNA, you can get identifying information on the organisms.
Cool.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Grant, do you work on anything in addition to what Jennifer was saying?
Yeah, so in addition to seeing, who is there in terms of the microbes, we also want to know what they're doing. And so I try to make that link by measuring the products that they spew out from their metabolism. So like we breathe out CO2, microbes do that as well. But they also can breathe out things like nitrous oxide and methane, which are greenhouse gases, all three of those. And so in experiments in fields like these, we like to, measure how many microbes are there, what different kinds we can find, but also the rates at which they're producing these metabolic byproducts.
So they kind of emit greenhouse gases like cars do, or?
Yes, they do. It's exactly like that. So they take in food just like we put in fuel into your gas tank, and then burning it in a car is essentially like burning it in your stomach. It's cars, people, and microbes have very similar metabolisms in that way. So you get the energy from your food, and then you inhale oxygen and you expel carbon dioxide. The carbon coming from your food, the oxygen coming from the air, and you expel it as carbon dioxide.
Wow, that's really cool. How did you get involved in studying microbes and ecology?
Well, so there are these really awesome fungi that grow on live-in plant roots and connect the plant roots with the surrounding soil. And these fungi, they're called mycorrhizal fungi, and they're really beneficial for plants and particularly plant drought tolerance too. And so I thought that interaction was so interesting and awesome, and that kind of pulled me into thinking about what's happening in the soil below ground, and linking plants with the organisms that they need to survive.
Nice, nice. How about you, Grant?
Yeah, similar, but I guess I have two different reasons for digging around in the dirt and looking for microbes. One, because it's sort of like space exploration for me. It's like, there's billions of microbes in a handful of soil. And so it's just fascinating to go in there, as if we were exploring space as a discoverer, to try to find things that people, answers to questions people have. But also they have a lot of functional significance. So I also dig around in the dirt to find answer to societal questions or environmental questions. Soils obviously are really important for producing food, for providing clean water, for mitigating or producing greenhouse gas emissions. So I want to study it for personal reasons because I geek out about it, but I also want to study it for larger environmental and society-based reasons.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's the reason I stayed doing this.
Cool. Now, what does a typical day look like for both of you?
That's the great thing about science, is that there is no typical day. So for me, sometimes I'm soil sampling, sometimes I'm constructing these rainout shelters behind me, sometimes I'm working on my computer, sometimes I'm talking with other people, trying to figure out what cool new question we can ask.
Yeah, it's a diverse, work week for sure, and especially for agricultural work, there's sort of a seasonality to it. So in the winter, it's a lot of writing and data analysis, but in the summertime, yeah, we get to come and dig in the dirt, or measure the thickness of the stem of a soybean plant, or measure greenhouse gases, or take samples back to the lab.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a pretty diverse.
Do you have a favorite part of your job?
Favorite part of my job?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. I like the data analysis. I like to make the graphs and do the statistics, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like being in the lab. My work involves a lot of processing in the lab of my samples after I collect them in the field, and I enjoy that. It's kind of, you get in a groove of where you can do it really fast, and it's almost mindless work. You really have to focus on it sometimes, but sometimes you just get in a groove and cruise through your lab analyses.
Nice.
It's nice.
It's been cool to hear the different people that I've interviewed all have different things that their favorite parts of their jobs. Some people really like the data, some people really like being outside, some people like the lab. That's cool. Okay, so you guys talked about soil microbes a lot. How does that relate to climate change?
Well, so soil microbes are organisms just like any other, just like you and me, so they can respond to the temperature and precipitation and wind and all the different climate variables that any other organism would respond to. But they're also really involved in producing climate on a global scale, actually. If microbes didn't respire all the plant material that gets, when all these soybeans go into the soil at the end of the harvest season, all the soybean roots and things like that. If the microbes weren't there respiring it back into the atmosphere, plants would suck down all the CO2 in the atmosphere in something like a few decades. So they're really huge drivers of global climate in that way. And so they keep a balance between carbon coming in through the plants and then carbon going back out through the plants and microbes to keep a stable climate for the rest of the planet.
They also, microbes also help to move nutrients through the soil and through the plants, and so that can impact future plant growth as well, and also influence that cycle of moving the carbon below ground or letting the carbon go into the atmosphere.
Cool. And what do the rain shelters have to do with growing soybeans here? How does this relate to climate change?
So in climate change in the Midwest, we're projected to have more rainfall variability, and that means longer periods of drought being broken by bigger rain events. And so here we have two different scenarios that are potential for climate change in the Midwest, and as well as control that's just irrigated like typical rainfall in the area. And so the control is behind us right now. So the two kind of rainfall manipulations are variable rainfall, so 3 periods of no rain broken by a rain event, and then the other is a drought, so a 6-week, a longer drought, dry period, a 6-week drought.
So these shelters are helping keep the rain that actually rains down out so you can simulate having a long time without rain.
Yeah. And because there's natural rainfall variability, we want to make sure that we're comparing our future projection treatments with a control behind us, which is periodically irrigated to the natural current rainfall.
Nice.
Yeah. So we have a really awesome setup for irrigating these shelters. So we have a pump right here with a solar panel on top, and this pump pumps water from this tank right here through this hose and over to the interior of the shelter using those sprinkler heads. And these run for a few hours in order to give the rainout shelters, the control shelters, the irrigation that they need.
The next question I have is, I know you're still working on your projects and nothing really ever is completed in science, but are there any results that you've come up with that are really interesting, or anything you've learned in doing this work that's surprising to you?
Yeah, so early results from this summer, we have some rainout shelters across the road and some switchgrass fields, and I've been measuring greenhouse gas emissions from them, and it seems like both methane and nitrous oxide, which are the greenhouse gases that the microbes can produce or consume, are responding to the rewetting treatments. So the ones that have those longer droughts, and then right after, so when there's a long drought, sort of the nitrous oxide production slows down, but it seems like the methane consumption actually speeds up a little bit. But then right when the water comes back in, there's a pulse of activity when the nitrous oxide kicks up a lot of nitrous oxide, but then the methane starts going the opposite direction and actually starting to produce some methane. So those are some early results that we're seeing in a similar field.
Yeah, and so under these shelters, we also have alterations of microbial diversity. So we have treatments that are influencing the fungal and the nematode community. Nematodes are microscopic worms that you can't see, but they're important for things like plant growth and carbon cycling, so we care about them. And so those treatments are already influencing the growth of the plants.
Oh, wow.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting to see.
We still have to wait to see a little bit longer into the experiment to see the effects of the rainfall treatment.
My last question to both of you is, why is it important to study climate change?
Well, it's a big issue.
Yeah.
It's a global phenomenon that's challenging so many people, so many ecosystems. And so it's important to know, how those, changing precipitation and temperature regimes are going to affect landscapes, but it's also really important to know exactly how these landscapes might end up contributing more to climate change in terms of producing greenhouse gases or potentially mitigating climate change as well.
Yeah. So this experiment has the opportunity to give us insight into how we might be better able to store carbon in the soil in agriculture systems, as well as some other more diverse plant communities. To think about climate change, it's just so important for an entire planet. And there are so many aspects of climate change that are going to change, how much rainfall and is going to fall on our plants potentially. And it's just so encompassing of an issue that picking apart the different components of climate change and understanding how that impacts ecosystems and communities of organisms is just so important for understanding what we're doing to our planet.
Definitely. Well, thank you both for your time, and thank you for letting us learn about what you do and who you are. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Yep.